I took the diagnosis report and broke up with the girl I loved most. Ignoring her tear-filled, disbelieving eyes, I turned away and bought the fastest flight abroad. I thought I would never see her again. 10 years later, I was lying in a hospital bed, mindlessly staring at a game on my phone, when the ward door pushed open. The familiar, cold voice of a new doctor made me freeze. I looked up, and my phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. I'm dead, I thought. This is it. It wasn't physical death I felt, but the death of the soul. The moment I heard her voice, I felt completely crushed, my spirit scattered like dust in the wind. That voice, now cold, dry, and professional, was the same one that had once whispered countless words of love in my ear. My heart stopped for a second, then began to beat with a violent, agonizing rhythm that pulled at my very existence. I raised my head sharply. Time seemed to slow into a thick, suffocating syrup. She wore a crisp white coat. Her long hair was tied neatly behind her head. Her forehead was exposed, and her neck was as long and elegant as a swan's. Her face was a mask of indifference. Those eyes, once full of starlight, were now shards of ice. She looked like a judge from another world, and I was the prisoner on the stand waiting for a verdict. She seemed startled by the sound of my phone hitting the floor. Her gaze fell on me, but there was no spark of recognition, no pause, no wave of emotion. It was as if she were looking at a completely unfamiliar object. I glanced at my reflection in the small bedside mirror. I looked pale as paper, my eyes hollow and haunted. I looked like a stranger even to myself. How could she possibly recognize me? A complex knot of relief and sadness tightened in my chest. She walked to the foot of the bed, picked up my chart, and looked down. Then, she spoke my name, the name that had bound our lives together a decade ago. The two syllables were light and sharp, like two bullets piercing the silence. I saw her freeze. Her entire body seemed to hit a pause button. 1 second, 2 seconds. The air solidified. She slowly raised her head, and her cold eyes locked onto mine again. This time, she wasn't looking at a stranger. Initially, there was confusion, like a stone rippling the surface of a calm lake followed by intense shock. Her pupils shrank, and then all emotion vanished, replaced by a gaze of ice fire that threatened to freeze me where I lay. We looked at each other across a 10-year chasm. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I wanted to say, long time no see. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I wanted to say, I missed you so much. But the words were stuck in my throat like fish bones. Instead, the overflowing emotion erupted into a heartbreaking, violent cough. I sat up, feeling as though my lungs were being torn out. She didn't move. She just watched me struggle in my embarrassed pain. Only when my cough turned bloody did she step forward. Hand, she commanded, her tone devoid of emotion. I obediently reached out my thin, wrinkled wrist. Her fingertips touched my skin for a fleeting moment. The cold contact made me tremble. She began a routine checkup: heart rate, blood pressure, pupils. Every action was precise, mechanical, and detached, as if she were operating a machine rather than treating a man who was once her entire world. I noticed her knuckles turning white as she gripped her stethoscope. She was fighting to maintain her professionalism. I gazed at her face. She was more beautiful and colder than before. Time had erased her youth, but replaced it with a hardened maturity. When she finished, she stepped back, widening the distance between us again. That distance was only a single step, yet it felt like the 10 years I had spent running away. Cooperate with the treatment, she said. Without another look, she turned and left. The sound of her high heels hitting the floor felt like she was stepping directly on my heart. Later that night, another doctor, Zhao Yu, came in. He was young and arrogant, trailing a nurse behind him. He looked at me with clear contempt. I'm your attending doctor, Zhao Yu. I heard you've been disobeying orders and playing games. Do you realize how serious your condition is? I remained silent. I was a machine that had run out of power. Lin when returned then, her face a mask of professional calm. She ignored me and spoke directly to Zhao Yu. Dr. Zhao, regarding the treatment for bed 41, I have a new idea. His cardiac function is declining faster than expected. Conventional drugs are useless. I suggest gene interference therapy. Are you crazy? Zhao Yu shot back. The success rate is less than 30%. The risk is too high. Asterisk is his only chance, Lin Wen insisted. Asterisk they argued over me, as if I were a specimen on a table, a cold subject with no say in his own fate. I wondered, asterisk Lin Wen, do you want to save me, or is this your revenge? Asterisk after they left, a young nurse came in to change my for. Seeing me awake, she tried to comfort me. Don't mind the argument. Dr. Lin is the best expert we have. She's only 30, but she's a top authority in cardiovascular health. Asterisk she continued. I heard she studied abroad specifically to research a very rare disease. Asterisk my heart tightened. Asterisk do you know? The nurse whispered. The rare disease she specializes in. It's the one you have. Asterisk the realization hit me like a bomb. She hadn't forgotten me. She had spent 10 years becoming an expert just to overcome the very illness that drove us apart. A wave of overwhelming guilt and shock drowned me. She hadn't moved on. She had been fighting for me from the shadows all along. It was a detoxification more intense than any heartache. Asterisk Lin Wen, you are a fool. Why are you so stubborn? Asterisk late at night, a sudden, crushing suffocation gripped my chest. It felt as if an invisible hand were strangling me. I bolted upright, gasping for air, but my lungs remained empty. Beside the bed, the heart rate monitor erupted into a sharp, piercing alarm. The red numbers on the screen jumped frantically as my consciousness began to slip away. My body felt cold and weightless, as if I were about to drift into the ceiling. Asterisk is this it? Am I dying? Asterisk I thought. Asterisk fine. At least then, I won't have to face her. Asterisk just as I prepared to give up the struggle, the door to the ward was thrown open. A white figure rushed in like a gale of wind. It was Lin Wen. Her hair was messy and her face was lined with stress, but her eyes were unnervingly calm. She didn't hesitate for a second. Her voice was decisive and clear as she barked commands at the nurses and doctors who followed. Asterisk, I saw Zhao Yu arrive, but he stood on the periphery of the crowd. He could only watch, unable to intervene, as Lin Wen took absolute control. In that moment, she radiated a powerful aura. She was the king of this room. Asterisk, the icy paddles of the defibrillator pressed against my chest. A violent current surged through me, jolting my body upward. My vision blurred and my limbs shook, but then I felt a hand, a warm, familiar hand clutching mine. It was trembling slightly, yet it provided infinite strength. Asterisk, it was Lin Wen. I felt her strength acting like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of the abyss. Asterisk, live on. Asterisk, a voice shouted in the depths of my heart. Asterisk, live for her. Asterisk, I don't know how long the tug-of-war with death lasted. When the monitor's alarm finally stabilized into a steady rhythm, a collective sigh of relief filled the room. I felt as though I had been dragged out of the ocean. I was drenched in sweat and utterly helpless, but I was alive. Asterisk, I managed to open one eye and saw Lin Wen leaning against the wall, her body shaking from the adrenaline crash. She looked paler than I did. Strands of hair were plastered to her forehead with sweat. In those eyes, usually so cold and strong, I saw a flicker of vulnerability and fear she couldn't hide. Zhao Yu walked toward her to help, but she brushed him off. He looked at her with a complex mix of admiration, helplessness, and a deep-seated jealousy. Asterisk, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke, early morning light filtered through the window. The ward was silent save for the sound of low, steady breathing. I moved my fingers and realized someone was holding my hand. Asterisk, turning my head, I saw Lin Wen slumped beside my bed. Still in her white coat, she was fast asleep with her head resting on her arms. Even in sleep, her brow was furrowed. I noticed a single, glistening tear at the corner of her eye that hadn't yet dried. Asterisk, my heart felt as if it had been pierced. This woman, who acted as hard as iron and remained a decisive expert during a crisis, had broken down and shed tears for me while I slept. I gathered all my strength to lift my hand, the one not tethered to an IV line, wanting to wipe away those tears and touch her face. But my hand trembled in the air before falling back. USELESSL. Why? Asterisk, what right do you have? Asterisk, I asked myself. Asterisk, you're a wreck. You ruined her life for 10 years. Do you want to ruin her future now, too? Asterisk, I closed my eyes as hot tears dripped onto my pillow. Asterisk, miraculously, I felt better the next day, at least enough to speak. When she came for rounds, I gathered my courage. Lin Wen, Can we talk? My voice was hoarse from disuse. Asterisk, she continued recording data, her head down. We can talk about your illness. That's all. Her voice was as cold as a surgical blade. She had wrapped herself in ice, refusing any personal connection. Asterisk, how have you been all these years? I persisted. Asterisk, she finally looked up, a bitter smile in her eyes. Thanks to you, I didn't die. She went back to her charts, ignoring me completely. Asterisk, just then, Zhao Yu walked in carrying a delicate thermos, a smug smile on his face. Wen, you've been busy all night. I brought your favorite porridge. Drink it while it's hot. He used the intimate nickname that used to belong only to me, pointedly looking at me as he reached out to touch her shoulder. Asterisk, Lin Wen moved as if she had eyes in the back of her head, stepping away to avoid his touch. She didn't accept the gift, but she didn't explicitly refuse it either. Put it down. I'll eat later. Asterisk, this vague attitude hurt worse than a direct rejection. It was a soft thorn in my heart. Zhao Yu, satisfied with his display of ownership, shot me a provocative look that said, asterisk C. You're a loser. Asterisk, in the afternoon, I heard from a nurse that a heated consultation had taken place. Zhao Yu and several conservative experts had strongly opposed Lin Wan's radical treatment plan. But Lin Wan stood her ground alone, using data and logic to fight them like a cornered lion. Finally, she issued a military order to the hospital board. Asterisk, if anything goes wrong with this patient, I will take full responsibility and resign. Asterisk, I was stunned. She was putting her entire career, everything she had sacrificed 10 years for, on the line for me. Zhao Yu thought she had lost her mind over an ex-boyfriend, but I understood. She wasn't just saving me. She was saving the girl I had abandoned 10 years ago. Asterisk, later that day, my parents arrived. They saw Lin Wan in the corridor and froze. They looked embarrassed and weighed down by guilt. Asterisk, Dr. Lin ... double quotes. My father started tentatively. Asterisk, Lin Wan turned. Her expression was neutral, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She nodded politely. Uncle, aunt. Asterisk, my mother's eyes reddened instantly. Dr. Lin, we came to see Chen Mo. Asterisk, he's in there, Lin Wan said simply, then turned and walked away without another word. Asterisk, inside the ward, my mother wept as she sat by my bed. Later that evening, she stopped Lin Wan in the hallway. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw my mother crying and talking while Lin Wan stood as still as a statue. Eventually, Lin Wan placed a hand on my mother's shoulder and walked her back to the room. Asterisk, as my mother peeled an apple for me, she continued to cry. Son, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what I said to Lin Wan today. I told her how much you suffered abroad alone. How you went through chemotherapy with no one to talk to. I told her you couldn't sleep at night and that you kept a photo of the two of you from graduation on your desk the whole time. Asterisk, I looked away. I thought I had lost that photo years ago. It turns out, I had hidden it even from myself. Asterisk, the next day, Zhao Yu returned, her arrogance peaking. She tossed a file onto my bedside table. So, you're just a nobody, aren't you? She sneered. I checked your background. You were a top student 10 years ago, but now, you're just a useless monster. Every word she says is a needle in your pride. How can you even compare to Wen Wan? You can't even save your own life, yet you want to drag her down. Be sensible. Leave on your own before I make things worse. Asterisk, she thought she could crush me. In the past, she might have. But now, I looked her in the eye and said, one clear word at a time. You don't understand her at all. Asterisk, the smile vanished from Zhao Yu's face. That one sentence hit her where it hurt most. She had the background, the career, and the health, but she didn't have the history. She didn't have the years under the ancient stars that belonged only to Lin Wan and me. It was a decade she could never replace, a gap that no one else could fill. Zhao Yu's face twisted. Her superiority vanished, replaced by a stunned, ugly silence. Asterisk, the door to the ward opened softly. Lin Wan stood there, looking at us with a complicated expression. I didn't know how much she had heard. My heart leapt into my throat. That night, I spiraled into a high fever. I fell into a chaotic dream where reality and the past blurred together. My body felt as though it were being roasted over a fire, then suddenly plunged into a freezer. Asterisk, in my delirium, I saw the summer from 10 years ago. Lin Wan was wearing a white dress, smiling at me under the golden sun. Then, the vision shifted to her tear-reddened eyes on the day I left. I'm sorry, I whispered in my sleep. Regret and pain were like poisonous snakes biting at my vitals. Asterisk through the haze, I felt a pair of cool hands on my forehead. The touch was incredibly comforting, dissipating the burning heat. A wet towel brushed gently over my face and neck. The action was so light, so soft, carrying a tenderness I hadn't felt in a decade. I tried to open my eyes, but my lids felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I reached out blindly and caught a hand, soft, gentle, and trembling. Asterisk, I gripped it like a life-saving torch, using all my strength to ensure I never let go. I felt the hand struggle for a moment, but eventually, she gave up. She stayed by my side quietly, letting me hold her through the night. Asterisk, the next morning, the fever was gone. Lin Wen was nowhere to be seen. It felt like an illusion, yet the ghost of her touch lingered in my palm. Asterisk, that afternoon, the heavy history of my 10-year race with death arrived via international email, a massive file of medical records from my time abroad. Zhao Yu had requested these materials, hoping to find a loophole to prove that Lin Wan's radical treatment plan was an emotional impulse rather than a professional judgment. Asterisk, they sat in the office together, flipping through the pages. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. One was looking for a weapon to overthrow the plan. The other was looking for a way to save a life. Asterisk, the world stopped when Lin Wen reached the very first page of the file. It was a copy of my original diagnosis, the black and white report from 10 years ago. Her eyes locked on to the date. Her pupils shrank as a violent shiver raced through her entire body. Asterisk, the date on that report was the day before we broke up. Asterisk, it wasn't that I didn't love her. It wasn't that I had betrayed her. It was that I asterisk couldn't asterisk love her. The resentment she had carried for 10 years as her only support suddenly collapsed. Asterisk, the word or was thrown open with such force it sounded like a scream. Lin Wen rushed in like a tornado, clutching that thin piece of paper, a paper as twisted and broken as my life had been. Asterisk, what is this? Her voice trembled. Every word was squeezed through gritted teeth. She rushed to my bedside and slammed the report down. Tell me, what is this? Asterisk, I looked at her eyes. The coldness was gone. There was only a pain so raw it made me suffocate. I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. All the disguises and lies became pale and powerless. My throat felt like it was blocked with cement. Asterisk, talk to me. She screamed, tears falling without warning. Why didn't you say anything? You liar, you bastard. She threw herself at me, hitting my chest. It didn't hurt, not compared to the suffering she had endured for 10 years. I didn't hide. I let her vent until she finally collapsed against me, her shoulders shaking with a decade of suppressed grief. Asterisk, why? Why didn't you tell me? She sobbed. Do you know how much I hated you? Asterisk, I know. I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. I'm sorry. I owe you those 10 years. Asterisk, I don't want to hear sorry. She looked up, her face flushed with emotion. I want the truth. Asterisk, I took a deep breath and dragged the secret out of the shadows. I told her how the doctor had said my disease was incurable and that I wouldn't live 5 years. I told her how I looked at her so full of hope and brilliance and felt total despair. Asterisk, you were the top student when, I said heavily. Your future was the starry sea. How could I let you be dragged into my abyss? I chose the most hurtful way to make you give up on me. I thought a sharp, short pain was better than a long one. I thought if you hated me, you would forget me and start a new life. I thought I was doing what was best for you. Asterisk, Lin Wen listened, stunned, her eyes full of profound sadness. Silly ... double quotes, she scolded through her tears. You are the biggest fool in the world. Asterisk, she hugged me, then a hug 10 years in the making. It was so tight, I could barely breathe. Her tears fell on my neck, burning my skin and my soul. Asterisk, at the door, Zhao Yu stood quietly. Her expression was complex, but finally, she turned away in silence. She understood then. She had lost. She could never compete with a bond like this. Asterisk, after she finished crying, Lin Wen lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but shone with an unprecedented firmness. Chen Mo, listen. 10 years ago, I didn't know. I couldn't help you. But 10 years later, I am your doctor. I asterisk will asterisk save you. Asterisk, the next day, Zhao Yu came to Lin Wan's office. She bowed deeply. I'm sorry. I was narrow-minded and arrogant. I apologize to you and the patient. Asterisk, Lin Wan accepted her apology. Zhao Yu then handed over a printout of the latest research from abroad. I checked the cutting-edge experimental treatments. This might be Chen Mo's last chance. In that moment, her former rival became her most capable assistant. Lin Wen brought the information to me. This is an advanced version of my plan, but the risk is much higher. The success rate is less than 20%. If it fails, you might not leave the operating table. You decide. I didn't hesitate. I'll do it. 10 years ago, I let go of your hand so you could live. 10 years later, I'm willing to bet everything so I can live with you. From that day on, the medical team worked at high speed. I stopped being the useless person in the bed. I ate, I did rehabilitation, and I fought to get my body ready. The night before the surgery, Lin Wen didn't wear her white coat. She wore a cream-colored dress, just like she did 10 years ago. We didn't talk about medicine. We talked about our high school teachers and the spicy soup we used to love. I took out my worn wallet and showed her the old, yellowed photo of us at 18, her making a peace sign, me smiling brightly. If I don't make it, I whispered, find a good person. Live a good life. Lin Wen didn't answer with words. She leaned down and pressed her cool, salty lips against mine, a kiss flavored with tears. She looked into my eyes with absolute authority. Chen Mo, you must come back to me. I have a reservation for the rest of your life. As I was pushed into the operating room the next morning, I saw my parents and Lin Wen waiting. My mother was weeping. My father held her tight. Lin Wen stood there, her face calm but her eyes burning with resolve. She gave me a thumbs up. The door swung shut, isolating me from the world. I wasn't afraid. For her, I would climb back from hell itself. The shadowless surgical lights flickered on. The white lie was over. The truth was out. As the anesthetic was injected into my body, my consciousness began to sink. The last thing I saw before sliding into darkness was Lin Wen, clad in her mask and surgical cap. Her eyes were focused and fierce with a silent promise. Sleep. Wake up. The next few hours were a blank for me. But for the team in the operating room, it was a brutal battle. Halfway through, the most terrifying scenario occurred. Sudden, heavy bleeding. My vital signs plummeted. The alarm shrieked, and the voltage on the monitors dipped. Everyone's heart was in their throat. Zhao Yu stood by, his hands slick with nervous sweat. He thought it was over. But amidst the panic, Lin Wen remained a pillar of unnatural calm. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She worked with the precision of a master architect, adjusting her technique and sealing the hemorrhage with steady, flawless movements. She dragged me back from the brink of death. 13 hours later. As the final suture was placed and the monitors stabilized, a cheer erupted in the room. Lin Wen pulled off her mask, her face drenched in sweat, and allowed herself a tired, triumphant smile. When she stepped out to the waiting room, she whispered, the operation was a success, before her legs gave out. Zhao Yu caught her, holding her with pure admiration and professional respect, all traces of her former jealousy gone. I woke up in the ICU, tethered to a dozen tubes. I was weak, but my mind was clear. I was alive. Where is Dr. Lin? I wheezed to the nurse. The nurse smiled warmly. Dr. Lin is exhausted. She's resting next door, but she told me to alert her the second you woke up. I closed my eyes in peace. Through the IQ glass, I felt her presence. Wen, thank you. I'm coming back to you. My recovery was swifter than anyone expected. Lin Wen checked on me every day, and the ice between us finally melted into a warm, natural tenderness. She was no longer just the cold Dr. Lin, and I was no longer the silent patient. She'd smile when I finished an extra bowl of rice. And we finally really talked about the last 10 years. I told her of the lonely chemotherapy sessions abroad, where memories of her were my only medicine. She told me of her journey from a girl who was afraid of dissection to a surgeon who could lead a 14-hour operation. She spoke of the nights she spent choking back tears while studying gray medical documents in the dead of winter. We had both been fighting, in our own ways, to find our way back to each other. Zhao Yu visited once, too. She no longer called her Wan, but Director Lin. She stood by my bed with a fruit basket, looking sheepish. I'm sorry for how I acted, she said sincerely. I'm truly moved. I can't compare to the history you two share. I wish you both happiness. I shook her hand, and the old grudges were buried. Half a month later, I was walking in the hospital garden. The sun was bright, and I was practicing my steps on the parallel bars. Every step was a struggle, but every step was full of hope. Linwen stood nearby, in her white coat, her hands in her pockets, watching me with a crescent moon smile that made her look 18 again. Wan, I said seriously during one of our walks. When I'm fully recovered, give me a chance to chase you again, okay? I want to make up for everything. Her cheeks flushed, and she nodded gently. 3 months later, I was discharged. It was a crisp autumn day. Linwen picked me up, wearing a casual outfit rather than her scrubs. She looked like the girl I had first fallen for. I breathed in the fresh air outside the hospital gates, feeling like I had been reborn. Take me somewhere, I said. We drove to our old high school. It was the weekend, and the campus was open. We walked side by side down paths covered in golden leaves. Everything felt the same, yet entirely different. We found our old classroom and the desk in the back row. There, in the corner of the wood, were the marks we had carved 10 years ago, our names joined by a small heart. My heart hammered harder than it ever had on the operating table. I took out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple, brilliant ring. Linwen. My voice shook. 10 years ago, I lost you and owed you a future. Now, fate has given me a second chance. Will you give me your whole future? She covered her mouth, tears falling like broken pearls. She couldn't speak, so she just nodded fiercely. I slid the ring onto her finger. Suddenly, applause broke out from the doorway. A group of students and old classmates including Zhao Yu were standing there, cheering for us. A year later, we were married. It was a small, warm wedding. In front of our families and friends, I told everyone. Many say Linwen saved my life. That's true. But more than that, she gave me the courage to live. She is the only light in my life. Linwen took the microphone, her eyes shimmering. He made me a better person, and he taught me the true mission of a doctor. Our life now is simple and full of quiet joy. We cook together, take sunset walks, and talk about our days. We also started a charity foundation to help others fighting rare diseases, passing on the luck we found. One evening, we returned to the sea where we had sat 10 years ago. As the sunset dyed the water gold, I pulled her close. We'll never be apart again, I whispered. She leaned into my chest, watching the horizon. Never again. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and the peace of a long-awaited home. Our story hadn't ended. It had finally, truly, begun.